Hello, everybody. It's Dave Neal, stand-up comic and host of Bachelor Nation News. Happy hump day to everyone out there. And speaking of humping, we've got a chat about purity culture regarding Madi Prewett and Grant Trout, or is she Madi Trout? Either way, they had a purity contract that they had their friends sign. They let this loose a couple days ago on their Instagram accounts. It's a fascinating story. I'm going to combine this with a podcast, the Date Card Pod, and their conversation with Talk Purity to Me and what they think about sort of some of the clips that we've heard of Grant and Madi's latest podcast. Follow me on Instagram at DNeal, patreon.com/Dave Neal for behind the scenes bonus content. And every afternoon, Bachelor Rush Hour, the podcast. Today, I interview Clayton Eckert. It's my first big interview of a former lead, as far as I know it, on the podcast, and I'd love to hear what you guys think. Leave a comment there and a link in the comment section to go listen to that full podcast. Okay, well, let's jump right into it. So they answered a Q&A, and in the Q&A, someone said, purity, it's so hard. And they said, blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. And then here's their response to purity culture. And as we know, Madi, and it's weird that we know this, and I do want to preface this because I got to put the kid gloves on when I have these conversations. I have nothing against religion whatsoever. I was raised in some ways religious and spiritual, and also, but not in a purity culture setting. So while I understand a lot of the sort of tenets of religion, I also am surprised sometimes when people talk so much about purity culture and the sort of resurgence that exists around it, which of course is not just waiting till marriage, but the idea of if you don't wait till marriage, you are now damaged goods kind of vibe we put on young teens, especially young women. Blessed. Okay, so she said, it's hard, but it's worth it. Purity culture, that is. Physical intimacy is the greatest gift in marriage, but outside of marriage, it's one of the greatest hindrances to intimacy with God and future intimacy with your spouse. You can't try and pursue purity in a temptation moment. You have to make a decision outside of the moment. Grant and I wrote out a purity contract and sent it to our best friends to hold us accountable. Can you imagine being like, honey, where do you want me to sign? On here? And I can't even touch that? And you can't even that? Okay. Be careful what you sign. Read the contract, folks. All right. So anyway, here's the here's a couple of clips that we have regarding the talk of Madi and Grant from the Date Card podcast. It's a fascinating conversation, and I wanted to just share a few of them with you. Go listen to the full thing. Jenna is joined by Blair from Talk Purity to Me, and we've had Blair on our channel. Blair does a fantastic job of illustrating some of the absurdities that exist in purity culture. Again, I have to repeat this till the end of the day. It's nothing against religion. It's what is against the fear that is used to control us, specifically with purity culture, young female bodies. Because as we know, a lot of the people don't practice what they preach. There's plenty of people that preach purity or preach fidelity, and then we find out that they're on a completely, the rules did not necessarily apply for them. So why does this sort of God from above care if we have sex with someone we either love or don't love? Maybe it's consensual and casual. Maybe it's, of course, consensually speaking. Maybe it's maybe serious young love. But either way, when that relationship is over, why should we feel shame and feel used when both parties just met somewhere in the middle and did a little happy dance?
I'm just getting, like, it's stupid. Like, I don't get it. Because I just wasn't raised that way, but I don't actually, like, I am not talking ill of people's faith, their religion, and the actual real, like, things that they went through.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that's for a lot of people who didn't grow up in it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's just much more mainstream now to talk about purity culture and talk about the effects of it and, like, laugh at the Duggars and, how, kind of wild that kind of stuff is. And I kind of call it, like, people look at stuff like that and they treat it like a freak show. And I understand it. Like, I'm not trying to be offensive to anyone, but, like, I understand why. Like, I get why it's so funny.
Yeah.
And, like, I sometimes think it's funny too, but also, like, just knowing that that's, like, people's real life and knowing from personal experience, not to that level maybe, but it's still very present in, like, evangelical culture. And although it's, like, funny to goof on, like you were saying, it's so heavy in a lot of ways.
It's really heavy and it's really real. And my not having understand it does not take away from the fact that it's just like it's genuinely a real issue. I just want to keep learning, and I want to keep like going into these spaces, and because it's like it's all intersex a lot in a lot of things, right? A lot of stuff that I stand for, consent culture and breaking down barriers and oppression that happen in so many different intersectional elements: racism, fat phobia, ableism, social economical like disparities within classes are all tied into this. So it's like that.
Yep. So it's a good point that it's all tied in the sense that there are a lot of people telling other people what to do with their bodies, and or making rules based on what they should do with their bodies. And we live in a time where social media is amplifying voices in all directions, voices that are pro-life, voices that are pro-choice, and pretty much any discussion we have, you'll find the kind of wild ends of the spectrum. So there are plenty of Christian sects. There are plenty of factions that don't preach purity culture. They say, well, we believe, this is that, and but there's also plenty of sects that condemn gay marriage. And you go, what? Or they go, don't hate the sinner, or don't hate the sin, hate this, don't hate the sinner, hate the sin, that type of thing. It's so wildly harmful to someone who's trying to figure out their sexuality, maybe in the closet, maybe someone who even had a non-consensual sexual relationship and now feels like they're discarded because that's what their church leaders said to them. We don't even know in hindsight how powerful those voices are, because as adults, maybe we can rationalize with it more, but super harmful stuff.
But it's interesting how Satan is so crafty to try.
So here's them listening to the clip of Grant and Madi talking. After this, we're going to get into their thoughts on it all.
Split that intimacy up.
Yeah.
Once you're married.
So true.
When you're dating, you go together. Now I can't tempt you with lust with her anymore. So how do I get you off that? And we have to fight. And there's moments that we have had that, not that we didn't, but we're like, hey, we want to choose to have intimacy right now, even after this big argument, because we want to fight for this unity. And we're looking at Satan right in his eyes and going, we're fighting for what you cannot tear apart with God on our side.
Ooh,
so
makeup sex.
Good.
Makeup sex.
Yeah.
See, when I hear that, I'm like, do y'all even really like each other? Like, did y'all get married and realize that it's just like physically, like the chemistry isn't there?
And what's tough is, Grant, I'm glad they opened up about their struggles on a podcast that discusses like overcoming certain feelings or, newlywed, all the things you need to learn. It's just that most people that don't participate in waiting till marriage figure out a lot of their chemistry in the first few months of their relationship. And by all means, it's like they got married right away. So it's not like they spent all this time not having sex, getting to know each other. In casual relationships, people are able to figure out very quickly, depending on their own, timelines, if the physical connection is as strong as other connections, and they're both important.
And that's the first thing that comes to mind, because, they, of course, if you're a Christian, you have to like over spiritualize it and be like, we're not connecting sexually because this is the enemy fighting against this amazing marriage. But it's like, maybe actually you just, since you didn't have sex before you got married, you didn't realize you have no physical chemistry with this person. It was all just sexual tension and then nothing.
Truly. And I think from somebody from the outside's perspective, I'm just like, yeah, I've always thought about people who've maybe waited till marriage for this like evangelical reasons that, yeah, the rate of them not being matched well chemistry wise after the fact was always confusing to me. And of like, wow, how do these people stay married after that? And seeing this is an insight to me. So they're making it religious based, like it's being tempted by Satan to keep them away from each other. And
some people will look at sort of the forces of ego as Satan coming after them. I think I personally don't care too much to like nitpick what terms people want to use to say like, oh, God is above us, raining down, versus God's within us. Now, people will argue that God's above us. A lot of times, having him look down on us, and we say him as if it's a man. It's like it's an orb of energy that connects us all. That's my belief. I don't call it whatever you want to call it. Call it God, Allah, Krishna, Buddha, Beyonce. I don't care. Beyonce, maybe that's the chosen one. I don't really know. You know what I mean? Am I single, ladies? But either way, it's like we get stuck in these semantics, and it's like Christianity is not the biggest religion in the world. It hasn't been around the longest. It's just a religion that tries to describe and manage forces none of us can quite comprehend. And that's okay. And it's okay to use Christianity for good. It's okay to use other religions for good. It's when we use it and say, well, the book says this, and that's why you shouldn't do X, Y, and Z. It kind of becomes like when you have a parent who's like, you can't do that. Why? Because you live under my house. And if you live under, and it's like, where's the rationale that men shouldn't marry men? I know you might pull out a Bible verse or something. Where's the rationale that you should wait till marriage? What does marriage mean? What did it mean thousands of years ago versus now? When we were talking about waiting for marriage, wasn't people getting married at 17? It's just nonstop kind of like questioning that can exist over these specifics. I think personally, if we got rid of the specifics, that people might lead a more authentic and happy life, because these little specifics, they don't really line up. I mean, we complain about the Constitution being old and outdated. It's only a couple hundred years old, but here we have text that isn't the original things that Jesus said. It's not the original things that the gospel had said. It's been translated through different mediums over centuries to fit different narratives. I risk losing audience members when I say Jesus wasn't white. He wasn't this sort of like sexy, dirty blonde hair with ripped abs and light tan skin. That's not what he was, okay? Christmas wasn't really on, his birth wasn't really on December 25th. It was made to line up with the pagan religion because they sort of overtook it. There's so many different things that you hate to say, like, it's not to say that we can't all pursue love and we can't all show up to different churches in pursuit of a common love and a common unity. It's that you got to decide which church you show up to if their values are trying to scare you or not. I say the same thing about political leaders. If you're looking at politics as who's going to rile you up most and scare you the most, be careful of those people. Be careful of any salesman selling you on fear.
Proper, like, sexual wife for her partner. And I think that I want to speak to, but like, yeah, the double-edged sword of like spending your entire life growing up thinking sex is negative and bad before marriage, and then you're supposed to just turn that light switch into liking sex now?
Mm-hmm.
Can you speak to both of those?
Yeah, I mean, this is the tricky thing. You know, a lot of people who grew up in purity culture sometimes struggle with whether they may be asexual, because there is so much fear and just so much emphasis placed on sex that it's like supposed to be a certain thing, that when they actually have a sexual relationship, whether it would be in marriage or out of marriage, and it isn't the huge life-altering moment that they were promised, that they're like, do I even like this? Like, am I just a person who doesn't like sex? And that might or might not be true. You know, you could be, but also I've heard, and you know, somewhat from personal experience as well, like it may be that, but also it could just be you have been taught to build it up so much in your head that when it's not that thing that you thought it would be, that you just think something's wrong with you.
There it is, folks. And you think something's wrong with you. And there's nothing wrong with any of us. You know, I mean, we've all got different issues, but there's, you know, we're all pursuing our best versions of ourselves. And that's what's important. And that's no knock on any other religions. That's just a reminder that we're all individuals trying to find unity. So as individuals, what makes us tick? What's the blueprints for how we work, but also absorb love and give love? And how can we be better, sort of of magnets for that love? How can we be better people pursuing higher energy, which is the most powerful love you can pursue, is the highest energy. So we look for all that, not fear that tears us all down and divides us. Let me know what you guys think. Leave a comment. We've got our interview with Clayton Eckerd coming up next, so make sure to click on the Bachelor Rush Hour podcast link in the comment section. We'll see you later.